back to the Common Sense Medicine podcast with your host, Dr. Timothy Chen. I am your co-host, Michael Abernathy, and today we are with Wendy.
Yes.
And we're going to let her kind of run the show, and we're going to be talking about some stuff. Tell us what we're going to be talking about.
Well, I thought we would start with the story.
Mm-hmm. Ooh.
Yes, and we're just going to go deep real fast. We're just going to go there.
Good.
I like it.
Okay, so once upon a time, actually it was about 14 years ago, I was in a very tough, very dark place. I had been in a terrible car accident and had broken my back in 10 places.
Oh my goodness.
Yes. And I had been through about a year and a half of therapy and healing. I did end up having surgery and had been in a large brace for an extended period of time. But I had gotten to a place where mentally it was very, very tough. And when we think of horrific injuries, we think of like feeling physical pain, but the pain that you actually feel on the inside, I feel like was a lot harder than what was happening physically. But no, I had gotten to a really hard place. I was still trying to be active in friend groups and things like that. But this particular time had just gotten tough. And I was having a phone conversation with one of my friends, and he pointed out, we were supposed to go somewhere Saturday morning, and we were going to be like outside and running and just like getting together, meeting in the morning. We'd go run in the park, and then after that, we usually would go eat or something. But I was hurting so bad. I was like, I can't go. Like, I'm going to keep everybody behind. Like, I just don't feel like that's a good idea for me right now. And my friend, he said to me, Wendy, he said, at what point did this injury become your identity? And I was like, well, I mean, of course, like I was in a horrific car accident. I'm hurting all the time. My body was broken. Like, of course this is what, and he's like, this isn't your identity. He's like, at what point did you agree with that is who you are? And I was slightly offended. However, I have learned that when you're offended, that tends to be the thing that I need to pay attention to because I have something to learn. Yeah. So I listened to what he said. I went that next day. I had a great time, but that was literally a pivotal turnaround moment for me. And so I saw my friend Wednesday night, and I told him, I said, hey, I'm doing a podcast with work. And I was like, I thought about that conversation that you and I had the other day. I mean, that you and I had, years ago when you said the thing to me about, when did you let this become your identity? And he was like, oh, yeah. And he said, well, who are you doing the podcast with? And I said, Dr. Timothy Chen. And he said, Tim Chen?
Oh, gosh. Okay, I know this person. This is a twist in the story. I was not expecting this.
Twist in the story. But yes, his name's Peter, and he knows you from college.
Yes. He stayed in my house.
That's what he said.
Oh, my goodness. I know Peter very well.
That's what he said. So when I was telling Michael this story, I was like, Dr. Chen has no idea, like, his friendship with Peter, and he made it sound like you were just a great friend to him during that time. I was like, his friendship with Peter contributed to my back being healed because he became the person he was today. That was that person to me. So I thought that was a great.
I like that. That's awesome. I'll have to reach out. It's been a minute. But okay, so Wendy, holy cow, that's amazing. I did not know this happened to you.
Yes. And it's something I was thinking about the other day. I don't talk about it that much anymore. Because I don't even think about it. It's like it never happened.
Well, we just finished this long series of weight loss episodes, and we spent probably more time talking about the psychological things that we deal with that kind of need to be addressed going into weight loss. And it's because, like you said, sometimes it's the psychological pain or the psychological things that are the hardest things to deal with. Like physical pain, we can deal with, it's the psychological stuff that just holds us back a lot. And I don't know if we explicitly talked about, I know we talked about developing a new identity as kind of the driving factor that gets you to where you want to be, like becoming that new person that you want to be. So building that identity. But I don't know if we spent a lot of time talking about how people allow, and I say people, I mean like we, everybody kind of does this, but allows what happens to us define us in some ways. And it just reminded me when you said that, I have a person that I've been working with for a while who has been overweight all her life. And it was this cycle of maybe self-sabotaging that kept occurring. And we started talking about it. And, I kind of picked up from her that if she wasn't that person, who was she? And she was bullied for her weight, and struggled with a lot of stuff. But that's the person that she's always identified with, is being overweight. And so if she were to actually succeed and lose the weight, she would have to redefine who she is. And she's identified as that so long. So there was this psychological struggle of, who am I if I'm not this? And so speak on that, if you don't mind, of overcoming that that identity crisis, so to speak.
Yes, it was coming to my mind, the story we're telling ourselves. And in the process of changing our health, or in the process of changing anything about ourselves, we can get a lot of knowledge, but no one talks about what it's like to actually walk it out. Mm-hmm. Like, okay, to wake up in the morning, set out with intentions, and during the day when you're faced with choices, during the days when you're faced with situations, when you're faced with people, how are you going to walk out what you planned? Mm-hmm. And so the identity part, James Clear says every choice that we make is a vote for who we are. Mm-hmm. And that, I think sometimes it's like, I also think every thought that we think can project the direction that we're going to go. And I think sometimes we start with like thoughts changing and then our actions change. But then sometimes, and this is probably the harder part, our actions change first, and eventually our thoughts and our beliefs start to line up. And it's in those moments during the day when our thoughts are telling us the opposite of the direction that we want to go, that is where change happens. Mm-hmm. That moment, like the decisions that we make on a daily basis, the scary part is we have to face a lot of things when we do that. Mm-hmm. When we get to that place, like we're going to have to face fears. We're going to have to face our past. We're going to have to face failures, lies that we've told ourselves, messages that we've heard, things that we've believed. I think in my situation, I did have a history of being athletic. Mm-hmm. And I think when you've had a history of overcoming in a certain area or excelling at a certain area, it probably does set you up to better excel or overcome later on. Mm-hmm. And that actually happened to me last year. I was faced with another health situation, and it was no big deal. Yeah. So yeah,
it's that building of resilience in one area. Kind of the spirit of resilience is easier to kind of transfer over to different situations. Exactly. So like once you learn that you are capable of overcoming, you can just apply that fact to kind of anything. Mm-hmm.
Right. And that what you said, once you learn, but you have to try it, but I don't even like that word try, because
do or do
you
not.
You have to
there
just
is no
do
try.
it.
Yeah.
But I think too, the belief that it's like, it's okay to fail because that's how we learn, is an important part of it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, Michael, I thought of two things when you were talking, because I hear this all the time with patients. The big one usually is, I'm just not motivated. I'm just gonna have to wait till I get motivated to get things done. Which maybe there is this part of like, wait until you're ready. But the flip side, I guess what you're saying is sometimes you just kind of have to start and then keep doing it until the motivation actually catches up.
Yes, because most people are motivated by results. Mm-hmm. If we don't have results until we've put a plan into action for an extended period of time. But I think back in the 90s, there was like a really big push for like motivation and doing things to get motivated and talk to yourself this way in the mirror.
Yeah.
But like I know in like, for example, like in addiction recovery, like one of the things they say when a person changes is they're sick and tired of being sick and tired. Mm-hmm. And you know, you heard the phrase like rock bottom, but that's different for everybody. Like sometimes rock bottom, everything in a person's life can look fine, but it's how they feel on the inside. Some people can lose everything and they haven't had that moment on the inside where they've believed like, okay, this is it. This is the time. There's no right answer.
Yeah. Yeah, that was something that I found for myself. One of the things that was that pivotal moment for me was when I started to lose all my weight and kind of make changes in my life to kind of fix where I was, because where I was not great, but there really wasn't anywhere else to go. You know, there was, to me, it seemed like, sure, there were things that could have gone horribly worse, but for me personally, I didn't see any further down that I could go. I had basically hit rock bottom. And so it was either stay there and drown or start, you know, climbing and swimming and clawing to the top. And, you know, that's still a process that's ongoing. And I think that's something too that you learn when you start to actually recognize the need for change and then start to pursue that change is there's always more that you could be doing and improving in some area. And that fear of failure, you have to kind of get desensitized to that somewhat, because it'll hold you back. That and fear of rejection. And we talked about that, you know, the rejection therapy kind of experiments where you just kind of ask for things that you know you're going to get told no to, and just do that. And you kind of, the rejection and the failure kind of loses its impact. And so the more you fail, the better you get at dealing with failure. It's just getting over that initial fear of it and embracing it as a learning moment that kind of keeps you going forward.
Yeah.
So,
well, no, and I think what you guys are saying here is so applicable to all our patients, right? Because everybody's dealing with something. We have patients that struggle with alcohol, patients that struggle with diabetes. And like you said, for some people, rock bottom is losing a toe. We've had patients lose feet, toes, and they're just still like, whatever, I'm still fine. I'm just going to keep going. And it's so hard sometimes to coach them and teach. It's almost like, how do you get people there to rock bottom? Is it just kind of just have to wait until they're ready? Or is there things that y'all do when you're coaching to kind of push them along?
That's a great question.
I don't have a good answer for that. Because it's one of those things, and you do the same thing that we do in those circumstances where, you know, you recognize the problem. You recognize how bad the problem is. You communicate to them how bad the problem is and what the inevitable end point of that problem is, right? And I don't know how to get more severe than this will kill you. If you don't fix it or take care of it, it will end you. I don't know how to make it sound worse than that.
Well, I think it's when someone else comes along and invites us into hope. Like someone else comes along that we relate to. They understand our experience. Like they've been where we've been. They can speak to both places. They can speak to the part of us that's hurt, but then they also speak to the part of us that's healed. People that have stories. I think a lot of those people they can't see, they can't even envision something changing or something being different. But then they see someone that's like, wait, okay, they get it. They've been there. They actually understand, and look where they are.
Yeah, I relate to that really heavily because of my experiences with weight loss. That's why I love weight loss coaching. And it's, you know, I have people feel like they can relate to that because I can tell them all of the things that they experience that they don't talk to people, because a lot of these things, the stigma behind being vulnerable and sharing the personal things that you deal with psychologically with your weight loss journey, if you've never been through that, it's kind of hard to understand that. But I have been through it, so I can relate to people and kind of put words to the things that they have not spoken. And it just kind of helps, like you said, relate. And I think that that's really important. I guess I haven't really thought too much about that, or maybe I did. It's just I haven't said it out loud, but that makes a lot of sense. So with things like diabetes and hypertension and stuff like that, having somebody to come along that has been through that and experienced that, and or has maybe and I don't even know if having, a significant family history or seeing people that you've loved go down those paths would be enough to kind of stimulate that relation. But yeah, that's pretty good.
Well, and I've noticed the more I've pressed into my own story, the better coach I've become. Like, for example, like coaching before I had a child to after I had a child. And I'm a completely different person, but I can speak to and validate and understand a completely different population. I actually, sometimes I'm like, there's people I need to apologize to that I was like coaching and training before I had a child and I understood.
Yeah.
Like, oh wait, this is what it's actually like. I'm like, just walk a couple times a week. You'll be good. Like,
That's right.
Yeah, that's like the problem with like TikTok or YouTube, where you get the 20-second, you get the influencers on there that are just like, just don't miss a day. You can't miss a day. 7 days a week in the gym, an hour, hit these, and it's like, people have jobs.
People have jobs.
Like our jobs are not to go to the gym and do, meal prep 7 days a week. Like most people don't do that.
Right.
It's like you get paid to do that. Maybe, I don't know. And like social media influencers are so, you can't trust anything you see on there.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's this unrealistic expectation of what people should be capable of, coming from a place that you have no idea what their life looks like. So it's like, and I think the other side of that is people who do have those situations where it's like their kids take up a lot of their time. That because kids take up a lot of your time, see that on social media and think, well, why am I not able to keep up with that? If this person is obviously the expert and they're saying I should be able to do this, what's wrong with me that I can't keep up with that? And so being a coach that has that experience, that knows the realistic expectations and can kind of meet them where they are instead of telling them where they should be, is extremely helpful.
Yeah. Well, another thing I was thinking, listening to your story and kind of relating to a lot of what my patients hear, and I would say probably a lot of people with maybe type 1 diabetes who were born with it, is this idea that, well, it's not fair. And I agree. I mean,
It's not.
you went for it's not fair. And sometimes with some of our diabetics, type 1, they've been dealing with since they were kids. All their friends get to eat whatever they want. They can't do it. It's not fair. You know what? I might as well give up. And I guess sometimes the message you want to say is like, it sucks. I know. I'm sorry. It's not fair. But we've got to do something. I guess kind of in what maybe did those thoughts come through when you were kind of recovering from all these injuries and things like that?
Absolutely. And you're so angry. But if you've never been taught how to deal with anger, if you've never been taught how to grieve, then you develop all these coping mechanisms that do the actually opposite thing of what you're trying to do. So I think that's what happens. Like, because getting a health diagnosis is a very traumatic experience for a lot of people. Having an accident is a traumatic experience, especially when you've kind of been going through, you're rolling on, you're like, everything's good. And then all of a sudden it's like something quick and that happens where we don't have a lot of control. Most of us, well, I'm not saying most of us, but I personally, when I broke my back, did not have the capacity to cope. So unfortunately, some unhealthy coping mechanisms came into play. So wait, if we go back to what you just said one more time.
Or patients are like, look, it's just not fair. I might as well just quit. I don't want to deal with it anymore.
And it's not fair. And it's hard and it sucks.
Yeah.
But I think that is like when we can sit with them in that moment and validate that, like, you are right. Like, this is not fair. It has probably been really difficult to see other people do all the things that you've really wanted to do. And it's not fair that you didn't have the resources or that like your body's not cooperating. People need to be seen. They need to be heard. They need to be acknowledged. And I feel like once they're validated and they feel seen, then that's when they can start making different types of decisions. An example, I had an example with my little one. She is like, school has just been a struggle this year. And I could tell that there was a belief system in there. Like a lot of what they do when they're practicing reading is they read out loud. And she realized, hey, these other kids are reading a lot better than I am. And she's been in school for long enough that this has been an ongoing thing. And the other night she asked me to play a song, and I didn't know what she was talking about. She's like, Mama, that song that's da 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 da. I'm like, I have no idea what song this is.
Sounds like at my house. That happens a lot. Yeah.
You know that song. So anyway, she was watching a show on TV, and the song was part of the show, and we had the captions on because that sometimes helps her with the words, and it said the name of the song. So she heard that the name of the song was called Stressed Out. So she went onto Alexa, and I like looked at what it was, and I'm like, oh, you can listen to that one. So there's the verse of that song is, let's go back in time to the good old days when our mamas sang us to sleep, but now we're stressed out. And that song hit her heart, and she cried. And she walked into the kitchen, and I said, "What is going on?" And she said, "This song." She said, "School is so hard." She's like, "I feel like everybody else can read and understand better than I can." And we sat on the kitchen floor. She cried for a good 15 minutes. We got it all out, and she started. And her start of school was like during COVID time. There was a whole lot of things that came into play. But the strangest thing has happened. All of a sudden now she's completing her work. She's fine. She's showing up to class. She's not anxious. She's able to get out of the car. And I was like, she just needed to be validated. That was all. That was it.
Yeah.
It's gone.
Yeah.
You're going to get me emotional when you're talking about
Yes.
Because I, immediately put my kids in the same like situation where I'm thinking about them in terms of like, how would I handle that? And that's a tough one.
But look, adults are just like that too.
It's true. But yeah, that's like my daughter was speech delayed for about a year, and we had to go through speech therapy and everything. And there were a lot of things where she would struggle with just tantrums, and for the longest time, it was there was something that she was struggling with, and I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was basically because she was trying to express herself and didn't know how to or couldn't, and then once she was able to express herself, all of those issues went away, and I forget exactly what they were, on the spot, but my wife and I were talking about it a few weeks ago, that it's been a long time since she's done this particular behavior or activity, and I said, well, that stopped about when she started talking really well. And so when people either can't express themselves or don't know the words to use to express themselves, or feel like even if they did express themselves, like who's going to understand it or hear it, like it leads to this bottling up that makes it really hard. And that's, like you said earlier, the coping mechanisms that come in with that. Sometimes you just got to let things out and talk to somebody, and like you said, have them validate that so that you can kind of process and move through it. Not necessarily move on from it, but move through it, because, everything that you go through goes with you everywhere you go. It's not that you just delete sections of your life. It's always a part of you. It's just, how have you grown and how have you evolved to not let those things continue to hold you down? And I think that was really, really good.
Yeah, I know. I think it's essentially what we're all trying to communicate here is, right, we validate, we understand, things are not fair, things are hard. I'm glad we hear you. We've got to go though. Like, we've got to move. We have to keep growing. And that's one of those things, maybe back in the day, I was talking to a patient the other day, like there was a behavioral psychologist that was talking about like development in time. And so like back in the day, there were some thoughts that depression was actually a very protective mechanism. So like, for example, if your house blew down, right, you're going to sit there, you're going to mope around because things suck, because now you don't have a house. The depression side might be like, slow down, think things through, ruminate a little bit. Let's figure out what's going on. What did we do wrong? Why did it happen this way? What can I do better? The problem then, back then, is, okay, now get up because you don't have a house. Like, figure it out, get up. You have to keep moving because otherwise we're just going to freeze and die. Now it's a little different, right? We can have a bad environment, something bad happen, but it's much easier to just kind of lay there in bed and be like, what, I'm not just going to do anything different.
So where that goes is, she said something earlier that was that we have to learn how to grieve. And it's interesting because that's not something you really ever think about. Like, how do you grieve? And the reason that sticks out to me is, if you ever watched the show The Chosen, it's like a biblical show of the times of Jesus or whatever. But in one of the episodes, the little girl dies, and he goes up and he resurrects her, right? And but they have at the time professional grievers that they would bring in to play songs and like wail and moan, and they were paid to come in and grieve with you, and they would sing these psalms that were written for that purpose of grieving, and it was like a community event where, you know, you didn't have to go through this alone. We have people that are experts in grieving to come in, and I mean, I guess we have that now and like grief counselors and stuff, but back then it was like that was the thing that happened. You brought these people in.
It was normal.
Yeah, it was normal. And so I can't name a grief counselor or even tell you where they are because we don't express that, or it's not something that we prioritize. You know, I guess maybe in Western civilization, but I mean in the United States, I'm not so super familiar with it. So it's things that, like you said, this goes way back to why do we have these depressive episodes? What was the original intent of that development? And then the grief obviously being something that needs to be worked through and experienced and felt. And now it's like we're not grieving appropriately because we don't know how. And then so we just kind of don't move on from it. Yeah. And so grieving is kind of this thing. It's very important that we do that and then move on. And if we can't grieve properly and get through the things, we just kind of are stuck, you know? And so I think what both of you said, that's kind of where my mind went, but like we got to get good at grieving again.
There's a John Deloney podcast where he interviews someone. It was from December, but like the title of it is "Grief Demands a Witness." Okay. And we were talking about the grief behind closed doors. And I think for me personally, like with my back situation, I was trying to deal with it on my own. Like, you know, I had gotten the information, okay, you make a gratitude list and then you do these things. I'm sorry, a gratitude list did not help me in that moment. Like, that's right. I was like, I remember writing like, at least my hand wasn't broken. Like, that's how I felt.
Yeah,
like, this is not fair. Like, I don't understand how this happened to me. But it wasn't until I talked with someone else that could sit with me in that moment. They weren't trying to fix me. They just witnessed that I was not okay. And in the right moment spoke some truth. And, but yeah, I think that was a really good point, is that a lot of grief happens behind closed doors. I know in coaching sessions, like a lot of people are brought to tears, especially when they feel like they're seen, and they apologize immediately.
Right. Yeah. No, I've had
Instantly,
that. Yeah. And I've always saying like, no, do not apologize for that.
Right. I would get disappointed if I coached like 5 people in a day and nobody cried. I'm like, no one had a breakthrough.
I don't know if I would. I have one person that I remember that was right there, and I remember the moment in my head so vividly because I was so close to a breakthrough, and it was like she was just about to open her mouth and have that moment, and she shut herself down and ended the session, and I have not seen or talked to her since. And I was like, that you were right there. You were right there. And I actually learned a lot about coaching from that experience, because that was one of those moments where the impact of that fear of failure, because the situation was that she had tried and failed and tried and failed and tried and failed. And instead of looking at it as, well, I tried this and I learned what doesn't work, and then I tried something else and learned what doesn't work, she had another opportunity to try something and maybe have some support that maybe she never had before. And she was right there, and the fear of failing again shut it down. And so that was a pivotal moment for me as a coach, like I said, because that's when it hit me that, man, the fear of failure will stop even like people that are just right there on the cusp of greatness. They'll just stop themselves.
Well, an underlying thing about what you were just saying is coaches, we believe that person has everything they need in order to be the best version of themselves. It's patience. Like when they walk in, we see them as a healed person. And our job as coaches, our job in the medical field is like, we have steps to help you get there. And we're just like, we're really inviting people into a journey. That's basically what it is. And I can relate to that moment, because we can, in those moments in coaching, or when you're probably talking with patients, there's typically like this moment where something's exposed that's holding them back. And we want so badly to be like, pull you over that line. But it's like, it is all dependent upon the person and the person's choices. Like, nobody can do that for us. People can encourage us. They can give us hope. They can give us steps, but we have to be the one to make that choice.
Yeah. And that's kind of hard for me to, and I still struggle with that. I'm better about it now. But for me, it's like, if you know what you need to do, then the logical thing to do is to do that thing, right? And so for me, it's like, we're at that point where we are, it's ready to go, and I want to, all right, give me your hand, and I'm pull you over, like you said, pull them over the line. But if you do that for them, it won't go anywhere. You literally have to just sit back and just wait, and you just, like you said, invite. And I don't think I've ever worded it that way. I think that's great. But that's a hard thing for me to do because differences in men and women, we're trying to, you knew exactly where I was going with this. That's what we try to do. We always try to fix things. And like my wife and I used to get into it a lot, because she'd want to express these feelings, and I'd have to stop and say, do you want me to just listen, or do you want me to try to fix it? You know what I mean?
That's a great question.
Yeah. And I'm a problem solver. I like to fix things. And so in coaching, that you cannot be the fixer. You can kind of lead and guide and encourage and motivate, but you can't fix. And any attempts to step into the fixer role can undo everything that you've been working towards. Right,
because it sends the message to that person, you don't know how to change, but I know what you need more than you do.
Yeah, it takes away their agency and says, you can't do this. And it's a struggle for me as a person that likes to fix, that I have to step back. And there's a reason it's called resist the writing reflex, as part of the, cognitive behavioral therapy or motivational interviewing state system of coaching, is resist the writing reflex. So.
Yeah, well, and I think this is what we've been talking about for a long time, right? Because we look at our patients, we look at our high risk population, we have a lot of feeling like, hey, we're so close, we can just fix these things. You would be great, and our view here, especially when we practice medicine, is like, I don't just want to drag you to 72 years old, where the average life expectancy for a guy is. I want you to have great quality of life.
Right.
I don't want you to be like, okay, I had my first heart attack at 60, another one at 62. Now your kidney's shutting down. We're on dialysis. You can't do anything, and we got you there with 14 medications. But you realize it's up to them. It's up to them to decide, yes, I'm going to do this. Yes, I'm not going to do this. And this is one thing I started telling a lot of people. Because a lot of people, it's just my genetics. It's my genetics. And I realized in the 90s, when we started really pushing, like, this is just genes, there's nothing you can do about it. And one aspect, it was to avert blame. Like, this is nothing you can do. You're just going to become obese and diabetic. It's just your mom had it, your grandma had it, which I guess the intention was to not blame people. But the flip side is, when you take that away, that means they have no control. You have no control to fix this problem. There's nothing you can do. And whereas maybe now the message isn't like, we're still not blaming. There's no blame around, but we realize this is all in your hands. You have a lot of control over how you respond to the situation. It's not up to, your genetics may play a role. It's not as big as you think. You can choose right now if you want to be better or not. And it should be an empowering message, not like if you don't choose, you're going to, be in trouble. But it's like, you are empowered to fix this problem. On the flip side, I cannot fix this problem for you if you don't want this thing fixed. And if you do want it fixed, and maybe sometimes with coaching too, we'll have pretty direct conversations with patients. Like, look, do you want this thing fixed or not? You have an idea of this. Do you want it? And sometimes that's what they need to hear, to be like, okay, well, I do want to fix it. Anyway, I realized this messaging that today's podcast is just become much more empowering to people to look, A, sometimes life stinks. A, sometimes life's not fair. B, sometimes we have to grieve and we have to go through these things. But C, you have the power to fix these things if you want to.
You're kind of the only one that has the power to fix them. And then a lot of times it's just kind of recognizing that.
Yeah.
And that's tough. I was going to ask you because, you mentioned not, browbeating people or pointing the finger. So you don't want to, give blame, but you also don't want to take away their control. But how much of that do you think is just the history of how people have dealt with their doctors or the medical field, where they've come in and just gotten lecture after lecture, and now there's this, even if it's not the case, it's just the culture of medicine is now this, shaking the finger at them. And so people just come in with this expectation of being lectured, and they don't want to come in and get beat down. So, do you think that plays a role in it? And I know that we're trying to change that, like very hard. We're trying to change that. And I think maybe that's part of why we do the podcast the way that we do is to show like, hey, we get it. The medical field is not necessarily the most fun thing. Nobody wants to go to the doctor. But it doesn't have to be, we want to be partners in this. We don't want to be, somebody that's going to beat you down, mentally, or the police for your health and all that kind of stuff. Like we want to go on this with you. Like you said, this journey, like come on this journey with us. And I think it's going to take a while to get there, but, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I think, I realize it's by generation I've seen. So like some of my older patients, the 50-year-old, 60-year-old population, they'll usually come like, all right, I'm ready for you to yell at me. I'm like, I have not yelled or fussed at any of y'all. Like definitely like ask my kids. Y'all don't know what that is yet. So you're right. That generation is very like, just, I know it's coming because I haven't done anything you said, and I know you're going to yell at me, which we don't do that here. We don't yell at you. On the flip side, though, it's very interesting because they're also the ones like, just tell me what to do. Because usually we'll give them options like, what do you want to do? And they're like, whatever you say. You say it's medicine time, I'll take medicine. You say it's not medicine time, I'll take it. They're very, I guess that's that generation of people that were raised up in that atmosphere of, the doctor's just going to tell me what to do. They know more than me. I'm just going to do it. The younger generation, we're talking like maybe 30 below, is definitely different. They're very much more like, well, I know you said this and I know there's studies, but I saw this Instagram person and I just believe that person more than you. And you're like, what? So it's definitely a different view. They want more control over their health for sure. They listen to podcasts, they read things, they look at labels, they do all the things. Maybe to a fault. Maybe like now they're at paralysis by analysis. Yeah, like too much stuff is coming at them, and they on one aspect, like one day they're low carb, next time you see them, like, oh, they're a protein only. Next time you see them, they're a vegan now, and they're just constantly jumping. And so you're right. Maybe we need it somewhere in the middle where like we're not beating you, we're a partner, but we're also trying to walk together and guide you in an evidence-based way versus just by the seat of your pants.
Well, my word for this year is settle. And I used to think of settling, I thought it was a negative thing until I actually started to look it up. But it's to like have a firm foundation and to be planted firmly in a place. And I have a lot of similar coaching sessions of this thing and that thing and that thing. And for me, what that looks like, it's like making a decision and sticking with it long enough. Because if not, what happens, I think we're like, okay, on to the next thing, on to the next thing, on to the next thing. Oh, this makes me uncomfortable. I'm going to move. And I had this thought in my head the other day. It was like, there's always going to be a better option. Always. But picking one, sticking with it, learning from it, and then, making some changes to it. I think, though, if we have gone to like one extreme or another, that's a whole other. Right. But back to the basics. So, for example, like there's essential things that we know that are good for people. We know drinking water, getting enough sleep, eating healthy foods, exercising regularly,
Managing stress.
Stress management.
5 pillars.
The 5 pillars, right. So that's like, if someone's like looking for a starting place, I'll steer them back and we'll coach around those things. Like, tell me how those things are going. And then let's talk about let's talk about macros.
Yeah, no, we've spent a lot of time saying that exact thing. The testosterone episode we did the other day, it was like, we have these guys coming in that are wanting to do their testosterone checked, and I'm like, you're 26 years old and you're actually like in good shape. Like, what? Why? Oh, well, I'm fatigued, and so it's like, well, you're managing your stress? Are you exercising regularly, eating healthy, getting plenty of sleep?
It's not fun.
It's not fun.
Yeah.
It's not exciting.
It's not gonna go viral. No,
it doesn't go viral.
That's right.
Yeah, but so much of all of those things can come back to those 5 things, right? And those are applicable to everybody. So it's like, when you say, let's coach around those and then expand from there, like, that's 100%, because everything, like, those are the quintessential things that everybody should be doing, right first.
Yes. It doesn't feel good. Like, I mean, so I just thought of another example. I worked in cardiac rehab before I did wellness coaching. And one of the patients had a catastrophic heart event happen, and fear can be a fantastic motivator, but it's only temporary. Right. So in the fear motivation, he cut out every single, like, what he considered not a healthy food. So no fast food. He was cooking everything at home. It was like baked chicken and vegetables and brown rice. I mean, he went all out. And his neighbor, this was maybe, he was in rehab after surgery, so this was maybe 3.5 months out, and his neighbor offered to bring him to Wendy's, which was formerly like their little thing that they used to do together. So he went to Wendy's, and he came in the next day, and he said, Wendy, I have never felt so bad. Like, he's like, I feel sick, I feel nauseated, my body feels swollen. He was like, my stomach hurts, and he was like, I ate this way every single day and I never noticed. So that's the hard part, because when you're eating that way every single day, for some reason it feels good.
You just, I've had that conversation with people with like hypertension, where they get started on meds and they're like, well, he wants to start me on meds, but I feel fine. I'm like, yeah, you might, but wait till your blood pressure gets down and you start feeling what actually feels good.
Yes.
And they come back and they're like, I had no idea how bad I felt at baseline, because you just get numb to it because it's just your norm. And then when you do feel good, really good, it's pretty eye-opening.
Well, to sum it up in a pivotal phrase, get comfortable being uncomfortable.
Yep. That's what we say.
I cannot tell you how many times we've said that. So
change is going to be uncomfortable.
We're not making it up.
Yeah. No, I mean, there's again, like you said, it's not, the basics are not fun. Like, no. They're not sexy. They're not like, groundbreaking, going viral. But we would say in our last episode, if you do the basics right, you probably accomplish 90%. Yeah. Right. You can spend it's kind of like your test. If you finish your test, you can go for the extra credit problem. Don't be trying to do the extra credit when you haven't even finished your test part. And so sometimes when it comes to lifestyle or diabetes or coaching or stuff like that, people come in trying to focus on the 2% thing. I had a patient telling me about red dye as she's vaping, and I'm just like, this doesn't even make human sense. Like, I understand, sure, red dye is probably not great for you. Vaping is definitely not good for you. And so it's like you said, sometimes we just got to go back to basics, get the basics right. And again, if we do those right, for the most part, the body will feel pretty good. We don't have to go crazy with all the other trendy things.
Well, there's a term that I've heard several times, and I don't remember who made it up or who came up with it, but it's called the lullaby effect, where you've heard something so many times and it's just, it kind of loses its impact, and you've heard it so many times that you don't give it the time of day to kind of see what deeper things you can pull from it. So think about a song that you've heard a million times and you've never really listened or read the lyrics, and then you hear it and you're just like, oh, I know this song, and you might even sing every word to it, and you just have no idea what it actually is talking about. And unless you actually sit down and listen, and then you're like, oh my gosh, this is a really profound song, or maybe something happens to you that makes you pay attention to it, and then it makes sense, and you see the song completely differently. But until something like that happens, it's the 5 pillar thing. Like, those are just kind of the normal things. We've heard that stuff so much. There's no novelty in it. There's no excitement in it. And we just kind of, when we hear it, we just go to sleep because we've heard all this before. We know all this. And so like you said, if you focus on those, you can probably get 90% of the way there for a lot of people. But we're so busy just sleeping through it that we don't give it any time. We just completely miss it.
For sure. Well, Wendy, I know I was looking at our time like, whew, we've really been going.
I knew that was going to happen.
Yeah. No, that's good. That's good. Well, I just kind of want to maybe summarize, and then we can give closing thoughts. So, of course, first of all, your story, super powerful. I mean, it's amazing that you had a friend like Peter.
No.
Really, I mean, we talked about things, right? Life's not fair sometimes. Life can be very, very hard sometimes. And sometimes we need a friend to kind of tell us how it is. Sometimes we're stuck. We can't see our way out. And having a friend that is honest with you, hopefully your provider, your coaches, right? That says, hey, look, we know things are hard. We know it's not fair. We've got to do something to get it better. I think the second thing we talked about that was really helpful is the person has all the power, right? They have all the power to fix whatever they want to fix. But it's up to whenever they're ready. Like we can pull, we can try, we can push, but at the end of the day, you're exactly right. We've experienced the same thing. When we push really, really hard, they may do okay, but then they'll just kind of fall back down. And so in today's episode, we're trying to tell people you're empowered, you can do it. If you need help, we'll be happy to help you. But when you're ready,
we're there.
We're there, right? The third thing I thought was really helpful is don't neglect the basics. Right, the basics work. The basics have worked for a long time. It's part of our DNA. Humankind does not change that fast. And so if we do the basics, for the most part, we'll be doing pretty good. Did I miss anything?
No, I thought that was great.
Okay. When do you have any closing thoughts, any encouraging things, or anything you want to tell our listeners?
Master the art of showing up.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
And not showing up to do, just showing up for yourself. Like, what does that look like every day to show up for yourself and to find a friend like Peter? We do. We need a friend that has permission to speak into us in that way. Or a coach. If we can't find a friend, we need a coach.
Yep.
We can be that friend.
Yes.
Well, awesome. Well, Wendy, thank you so much for coming on. You have to do this again. We'll have to. It's really fun.
For sure.
Yeah.
I'd love to.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll see you guys next time. Thank you for tuning in.